Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good golly Miss Molly, and welcome to the madness that is the Charlie Marx Show. With me, your host, Charlie Marx. This is our anniversary second show. So if you missed the anniversary first show, please feel free to check it out. Or even better, like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and follow the Charlie Marx Show. You can also leave me a comment, or why not join the show by sharing a problem with viewers' letters, or tell me what's bugging you in the world with the Devil's Advocate. I can also be spied upon by you visiting www.charliemarx.co.uk. I'm delighted to announce that we here at the Charlie Marx Show are only 999,914 views away from reaching our million target. So, keep up the good work. Now, it's been a busy week as I took some time out to take some time out. During this time out, I found that waiting for time to go by was time consuming. So I decided that I would no longer waste my time taking any more time out. Coming up on tonight's show, we have, as previously mentioned, Viewer's Letter, plus all the latest fake news from around the world and beyond from the CM Newsroom, plus our special guest I think you'll be dying to see, plus Storytime with Sir Percival Homosexual reading Ass of the Year, and of course moans and groans and things that go irk in the night with the Devil's Advocate. But before all the insanity which is the Charlie Marx Show, a quick word from our sponsor. Flash! Thank you to our sponsor, and I have to say that I cannot recommend that highly enough. Now, let's see if we can help one of our viewers with a problem only the Charlie Marx Show can solve in Viewer's Letter. Today's Viewer's Letter comes from a desperate lady looking to get help as she struggles with all the chores by herself. It goes like this. Dear Charlie, one watched your last show and realised that you may be one's last chance one has for help. Although one is in the twilight of one's life, one recently married a man of similar age that one has been courting since we spent the day naked on a beach in Manchester while sharing an umbungo drink. He was so handsome and intelligent, and we talked for hours on such topics as his mother, and the fact that they do indeed drink umbungo in the jungle. One does digress, however. We live in a detached house in the centre of London, and although one never thought one would ever live here, one is beginning to wish one had just stayed in one's one-bedroom flat in Croydon with the strange neighbour and the damp patch. The flat also had a damp patch. One doesn't want to seem ungrateful, but one is now a pensioner, and one finds that coping with all the housework, the shopping and the ironing has one exhausted. My husband Charles is always pottering about in his shed at the bottom of the garden, and although it's several thousand acres away, he makes no allowance for time and is continually late for his dinner. One wants to save one's marriage, as one has waited absolutely ages to get in here, but one doesn't know how much more one can stand before one loses one's rag. One sincerely hopes that one can help one. Sincerely, Camilla. Well, Camilla, one does try one's best to help one, or even perhaps two, on the Charlie Marx Show, and one feels your pain. It's never easy when there are two in a partnership and only one does all the work. However, there is most certainly scope to help you with your particular problem. The first thing I would suggest is that you add to your numbers and become a relationship of 3. Then the relationship 3 may become 4, 4 may become 5, and so on. Soon there will be so many people one of them is bound to have a fetish for cleaning. The technical term for this is called pyramid relationships, and trust me, there will always be someone at the bottom being left to do all the housework. Have you noticed that most men, when faced with a job to do around the house, will grumble, moan, become huffy and even cry? But this does not happen when he's asked to do some DIY. Now, you may think that this is because men like building things, but there is a specific reason behind this behaviour. Scientific studies have shown through extensive studies that men will perform tasks more willingly when the tools they use for a task are shaped like weapons. For example, the screwdriver looks like a tiny lightsaber. The drill has the distinct shape of a gun. And the mole grips have the uncanny look, almost identical to a T-Rex. Now, Camilla, with a little bit of innovation on your part, you could have Charles insisting that he does everything in the house, whilst you put your feet up and catch up on those shows you've saved on your list on Netflix, like The Windsors or The Crown. Or perhaps you might just appreciate the time to catch up on a good book like Spare. With some cardboard and some sticky tape, you can transform your Hoover to look like an assault rifle, your cleaning sprays into Wild West Colts, or even turn your washing up gloves into Batman gauntlets. Yes, it's going to take you weeks rewatching episodes of Blue Peter, but the results will be worth it. And soon Charles will be fighting you to do the housework. I hope this advice helps you and Charles not only save your bad back, but also your marriage. And that was Viewer's Letter.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. What I do know is that you are watching the Charlie Marx Show. If you like and subscribe, that'll be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you do not like and subscribe, I will look for you, I will find you, and I will kill you.
Harsh. Coming up, our special guest, Storytime and the Devil's Advocate. But before all that, it's time to get a roundup of the latest fake news from around the world and beyond with CM News. Good evening, and welcome to CM News with me, Emily Bronte. Our top story this evening. Optimus Prime finally wed his long-term boyfriend, Tesla, in a quiet ceremony in a garage in Ohio. The full service was performed by a mechanic, the Right Honourable Reverend Jim Bob Jones, and attended by family, friends, and the manager of Reeves Tires. This is the first time a gay marriage has taken place in the sleepy small town of Prejudice Views, and locals were delighted to witness their first ever Transformer wedding. Some local news now. Super beautiful Wonder Woman actress Gal Gadot is not returning any of my calls. The managing director of DTLF, the London Dyslexia Foundation, Brian Murgatroyd, has been suspended from his position pending an inquiry into an investigation concerning the misuse of government computers to download naughty things. The 93-year-old made a statement to CM News through his lawyer, stating that he was merely looking for a meal when he tried to download internet porn. A spokesman for the London Dyslexia Foundation said, "Mr. Murgatroyd, sorry very done he what." More local news. Actress and all-time beautiful woman of my dreams Gal Gadot has blocked me on Facebook. Movie news now, and Al Pacino's latest film outing, Wind and Rain, has taken the box office by storm. More local news. The woman who would make the perfect wife for me, according to my mother, Gal Gadot, has recently blocked me in all other forms of communication. We'll keep you updated with this story as it unravels. A new marvel in technology has been revealed by Apple. The new iPhone 27 can now be actually used to make phone calls. Some breaking news now. A restraining order has been taken out by actress and future mother to my children, Gal Gadot, against me. A spokesperson for me said that my client is hopeful for a July wedding. And finally, a quick look at the papers. Very nice. And that was the latest from CM News. This is Emily Bronte for CM News. Good night. Thank you, Emily. And there will be more from the CM Newsroom next time. But now, my special guest. You may know my guest as a man with the hood and the scythe, the tall, dark, skeletal cloaked figure who looms in the darkness, biding his time for your time to be up, awaiting the infamous rattle in your throat before you close your eyes for the final time, allowing him to take you on your final journey, either above or down below. But ladies and gentlemen, is this the real death? Born Shelby Bromstein, my guest this evening, Death. Welcome to the show, Death.
It's lovely to be here, Charlie.
As I said in my introduction, you were born Shelby Bromstein and you live with your parents Sydney and Ethel, along with your younger sister Janie, with a Y, in a small one-bedroomed apartment in Brooklyn which looked onto the Church of Mutual in Clark. How was life growing up in such a cramped condition?
Well, my parents were poor and could only afford 2 holidays a year, whilst my sister, Janie, with a Y, and I stayed home to look after my father's aquarium. We did hope that one day he might put some fish in it, but like I said, money was tight.
You spent your pastimes collecting famous rabbi cards and playing the triangle in a postmodern punk band. Were your parents supportive of your hobbies?
No, not really. You see, every time I practiced the triangle for the band, my mother would think the telephone was ringing, and she grew to hate anything that was connected with children.
I read somewhere that your journey through education was a little complicated.
Very, very much so. I was homeschooled, where I gained a diploma in tidying my room, but I had to be taken out of homeschooling because of the relentless bullying from my little sister. I was moved to another school, which was my Aunt Sheila's house 3 blocks away.
And the remainder of your schooling was rather uneventful.
Yes, sadly I left Aunt Sheila's house without gaining any formal qualifications, although I did manage to get 2nd place for the child most likely to be sent to the front line during a war.
And did your lack of qualifications displease your parents?
Displeased? They were furious. So much so that I was locked in a cupboard and only allowed out to blow the candles on my birthday cake. It was the worst 45th birthday ever.
So how exactly did you get the job of Death?
I was at the job center and nothing was suitable for someone with the qualification of tidying his room. So I left. And as I was crossing the road, I was hit by an old man driving one of those motorized scooters and killed. Next thing, I'm standing in front of a set of large pearly gates, and this guy, Gabriel, is standing there desperately trying to find my name on his iPad. Turns out I'm not in the list. I was told that because my life was so boring and mundane, they weren't really watching me, so it wasn't technically my time to die. As you can imagine, I was rather annoyed by this, and I told Gabriel to let his boss know about my unhappiness with the situation.
And did he?
He certainly did, and the boss, realizing his error, offered me a $20 gift card and a voucher for the canteen, but I was not happy. I was just getting into season 8 of The Walking Dead, and I would never know if Rick survived the explosion and came back.
He didn't.
Seriously? Oh, geez. You could have said spoiler alert. Anyway, I could tell he was worried that I might sue, and suddenly remembering that the original Death was about to retire, he offered me the job. It had good dental plans, so I accepted.
It's often said that you are the last person someone wants to meet.
I usually am the last person they meet.
Quite. How does it feel having a job that people despise you for?
But when I explain that it's not me who makes the rules when they exit this mortal coil, and that right is only for God, if you believe in him or her, or time itself, if you believe in that. And these rules are very strict with my job, and there's no point in trying to barter with me because I have strict instructions to put an end to you. And there's no, oh please, 5 more minutes. I promise I'll come right in and have my bath after the game.
Mummy issues?
Oh yeah.
But there are some people who actually request your presence.
Definitely. Like when a pet or a loved one is suffering and they want the suffering to stop. Or when someone is at a party and they ask the woman they're talking to when they're due, and it turns out that the person is just chunky or Catholic. Oh, I'm wanted then.
Fascinating. And finally, through the years, I bet you've met some celebrities. Any particular awkward ones?
To be honest, they're usually too stoned or drunk to know they've been taken. I've had to take Keith Richards in monthly installments, and it took 2 of us to lift Elvis. But generally they come with little fuss, as long as we make sure they're getting the best room.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest this evening, Death.
Thank you very much.
Now it's time to slip into your pajamas, get your cozy blanket, throw another weasel in the fire, and curl up on the sofa with a nice glass of wine as Sir Percival Homosexual reads this week's story, Ass of the Year, in Storytime.
Hello children, and welcome to Storytime. Tonight's story is a beautiful farm tale from long, ages ago, titled Ass of the Year. Old MacDonald was up early that morning, and as he stood in front of the mirror in the kitchen, deep in thought, combing his wiry ginger beard. He had been preparing for this special day for the last 364 days, and was super excited, even more so than having a date with Mildred, his second favourite sheep. Some time later, old MacDonald sat at the table awaiting the arrival of fruit from the very lazy Mrs. MacDonald, his wife. Sure, she had been up all night delivering the new calf, and she ploughed all the 7 fields on their farm, and she taught the pigs how to play canasta. But surely a husband deserves a hot meal on the table after he's combed his beard. His wife, Mrs. MacDonald, sleep still in her eyes, entered the room with his breakfast. Old MacDonald looked at Mrs. MacDonald smiling, knowing that destiny would always have brought them together, especially as her name was Mrs. MacDonald. "There you are, my lover," she said in a friendly Yorkshire accent. It was a warm, inviting accent, but rather strange as she was from Sweden. She placed a fresh plate of boiled horse manure and potatoes down on the table in front of her husband. "Ah, my favourite breakfast," he smiled, placing his comb back into the bucket of sewage which sat by his feet. "Well, you have to keep your strength up for the competition today, my lover," said Mrs. MacDonald, as she silently wondered where she had picked up that strange accent and why it was now sounding more of an Irish Pakistani accent. As she walked away from him, he stared at her bottom, licking his lips. "That but a fine rump you have, wife." Mrs. MacDonald blushed, and with a wry smile she gave her bottom a little wiggle as it disappeared out of the kitchen. It would be 2 hours and 27 minutes later that her bottom would cease to jiggle. Life had been good to the MacDonalds. Although they had no children that they knew about, they had an ample love life, which some would say was old-fashioned, some would say was sweet, whilst others would say, "Please, Percival, I'm trying to have my dinner here." Their monthly routine had them practicing the art of passion, the way they had been taught by the local parish priest, each of them in a separate room wearing a duffel coat and Wellingtons. Oh, how they longed for a child, but as their life moved on from their youth to middle age, then pre-old age to moderate old age, they realized that it would now take a miracle for them to get pregnant, or for at least Mrs. MacDonald to get pregnant. Subsequently, neither of them believed in miracles, except for that one time when old MacDonald had raised his Uncle Robert from the grave. But as it turned out, Uncle Robert was only sleeping after a large Sunday roast, and the family had buried him prematurely. Old MacDonald and his wife had met in 1927, when life was slower, fashions were nicer, and looking up pornography meant raising your head to the top shelf in the newsagents. Old MacDonald worked in the winter selling ice creams to sadists, and Mrs. MacDonald worked as a hairdresser in the alopecia centre. Both their sets of parents were divorced and then met and married each other, so technically old MacDonald and Mrs. MacDonald were stepbrother and stepsister. But in the village this was not only accepted, but encouraged. Old MacDonald looked up at the mantelpiece, wondering if the old crooked wooden structure would ever house the trophy he desired. And he had done so most of his life. His neighbour old Bert had won the trophy 3 years running, and there grew to be a very personal vendetta between the two men. Old Bert had not had an easy life, though. It was thought as unfortunate that his parents had named him Old Bert, and it was only now that he had progressed to old age that his name seemed to finally fit. Old MacDonald knew that the trophy would bring him not only the large cash prize of 2 shillings and 6pence, but the self-satisfaction that he could hold his head up high in the village once again, after that unfortunate incident with the vacuum cleaner. Winning the trophy would also allow him to get one over on Old Bert and their private wager of Old Bert's X-File DVD collection against Old MacDonald's wife. In all honesty, and you couldn't get more honest than this story, Old MacDonald's chances of winning the trophy, the cash prize, and the private wager he had with Old Bert all came down to one thing: Mrs. MacDonald. Could she be the one to this time win what he desired? After all, it was her ass that was being entered into the competition. Mrs. MacDonald had always taken great pride and care of her ass, but there was a realization that due to no fault of her own, her ass was getting older, thus causing it to sag, form wrinkles and turn grey. Old MacDonald finished his breakfast and walked cautiously to the mantelpiece. How he longed for that trophy to stare back at him when he sat by the fireplace in his favourite seat, the seat made completely from bacon fat. He never wanted the runners-up prize of largest ass, nor the cup for best groomed ass, and he could only scoff at the thought of getting the award for healthiest ass. It was a grand prize he wanted. Nay, obsessed. The Ass of the Year award. As old MacDonald stood in the daydream, he smiled Lord. The trouble was, he knew his wife's ass was not as it had once been, and he realized that if her ass didn't win this year, then next year it would be too saggy to compete, especially with all the younger asses that were coming up through the ranks every year. To put it bluntly, Mrs. MacDonald's ass wasn't worth a shilling. Sure, he had been tempted in the past to disregard his wife's ass for a younger ass, but he could never bring himself to do so. Anyway, Mrs. MacDonald's ass had been with him for so long, it was almost part of the family. Perhaps, he thought to himself, that he should just forget all about the Ass of the Year trophy and stop putting his wife through this year in, year out, as she'd already been through so much, especially with her dodgy leg, her wooden eye, and her halitosis. Suddenly, Mrs. MacDonald rushed into the kitchen, sobbing and flailing her arms wildly. "Whatever is the matter, my dear?" asked old MacDonald nervously. "My ass! My ass!" she screamed. Old MacDonald stood and looking at her. He was petrified. "What about your ass?" She looked at him, then paused and took a large breath. My ass took its final breath and passed away. Old MacDonald said nothing and slowly moved to his favourite bacon-scented chair and sat down. He looked up at the mantelpiece and a tear formed on the side of his eye. All his plans and future dreams were over, perhaps even his life. "Please don't get upset, my lover," she whispered, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Tomorrow we can go out and buy a new ass from the market." Old MacDonald looked at her, then placed his hand on hers. "Yes, my dear, we will buy another ass, or perhaps even a donkey." That night, as the couple lay in bed, thinking of a new beginning to the adventure, the farmhouse burned to the ground, and they were all toasted. Some say that fire might not have been so quick to spread if the couple hadn't painted their walls with paraffin, but we will never know. As the priest stood above the grave of old MacDonald and Mrs. MacDonald, he knew that somewhere beyond the great beyond, old MacDonald would be preparing for a very special competition. The Heavenly Ass.
And Sir Percival will be back next time with another exciting tale in Storytime. But now, as the dawn of madness draws to a close, it's time for another roundup of moans and groans in The Devil's Advocate. Welcome, boys and girls, to The Devil's Advocate. Tonight's moan is titled The Cost of Charity. But before I delve deep into this gripe, I shall inform you as to what brought me here. I love music. Sure, I have my favourites and I have my not-so-favourite favourites. But because I work as a writer, I am listening to music all the time. I listen to a lot of jazz, especially the older stuff like Monk, Brubeck and Kenton, etc. And like my love for classical musicians like Mozart, Beethoven and Rachmaninoff, I will only stop listening to it when I fully understand it. This kind of music relaxes me in the way that Playboy used to, and like a good centerfold, opens the mind. Now, this may be difficult for you to believe, but I am very similar to the classical musician Handel. Oh yes, dear viewers, you see, Handel's servant used to bring him chocolate in the morning, but one morning he saw that his master was in tears. He was emotionally drained from writing a divine composition. Do you see the resemblance? I also like chocolate in the morning. My love of music also extends to rock music like Queen, Rush, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, and these rock bands are wonderful to see them doing what they do best. Sadly, many members of these bands are no longer with us, and it always seems to me that when these masters pass, something magical disappears from the industry. Each year we appear to lose more and more of these people who were in our lives from our youth through the good times and the bad times, like Freddie Mercury, David Bowie, Neil Peart, Malcolm Young, Bon Scott, and so many more. And yet they live on through their music. There must be a hell of a group in heaven right now, but I just hope it's not the same promoter as Oasis have, or the Angels will never be able to afford tickets. As I get older, I find I'm appreciating music more and my tastes have broadened. Sure, I've listened to Billy Joel for 40 odd years, but I think as you get older you appreciate not only the artist, but the song and the album itself. And this, my friends, is where it all begins. Some time ago, I was visiting my mother and father. I was obviously asked if I could spare 5 minutes for something they wanted me to do or fix that would take many hours over the 5 minutes. I'm usually called up because Netflix is down, or the internet's down, or Watership down, but no matter what it is, I'm expected to magic a solution. Now, on a particular calling to fix an answering machine that was refusing to answer, I noticed that my dad had an old record player. I questioned why he had this, seeing as he doesn't have any records, and he sheepishly shrugged and bagged it up for me. At least I now have the answer as to why his CDs are all scratched. I went straight out and bought a few albums. Kate Bush, Katie Melua, and Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. And the cost of these albums new was eye-watering. Now, I don't buy albums as collector's items. I buy them to play and enjoy the music, whilst I sit and read the sleeve notes. However, I put the cost of the new albums out of my head and returned home and put on one of the albums. There is nothing more warming nor soothing to hear than when you first place the needle on the record and you hear that special crackle. This is an experience that could never be replicated by CD or MP3, as these platforms, in my opinion, are just too clinical. I then sat down in my chair and proceeded to indulge myself with the information notes, lyrics and pictures on the album covers. Bliss. Who needs art galleries when you have such iconic cover artworks like Iron Maiden, The Cult, Kiss, and, of course, Boris the Johnson at the Wurlitzer? Look, the album cover says it all. We have Boris the Johnson, and if you look carefully, you can see that indeed he is at a Wurlitzer organ. Anyway, I digress ever so slightly, as I so often do. I loved listening to the albums, but there had to be a way of getting records cheaper. Oh, how wrong I was. Sadly, antique programmes on the TV and people who bid ridiculous amounts of cash on certain sites are primarily to blame for the changes that have taken over the once simple hobby of listening to music. Newsflash! Albums are now collector's items. Really? Is that what constitutes antiques nowadays? Surely not. But yes, people become too attached to their collections, and through misinformation for what an antique actually is, or perhaps just plain and simple greed, some people just outprice everything they can. Firstly, I came across this article in a made-up magazine. It read, I was rummaging around at a car boot sale the other week, and at one particular stall I saw a Superman comic, so I bought it for my little grandson. He loves Superman, even though he's in his 40s and should have a girlfriend by now. But, being a grandma, I bought it for him. Well, bless my cotton belly warmers, but did it not turn out to be the original first copy, worth over £200,000? I sold it online and got a new BMW and a girlfriend for my grandson. What a find for 20 pence. Now, I imagine the owner of the stall at that particular car boot sale read this whilst attaching the noose to the attic beam. Okay, I get it. Nobody wants to part with something for 20p that could be worth thousands, but these kind of finds are rarer than finding a book in the Big Brother house. Another scenario I'm just about to make up happened on an episode of the Antiques Roadshow. A young lad wearing his jeans too low and upon his head a Burberry cap stood with the expert looking at a painting of a female nude that he found at a car boot sale. Anyway, the conversation went like this, and I shall be providing a translation for the young lad. The dealer asks, "This is a fabulous painting you have with you. Can you tell me where you got it?" The boy replies, "I was at the car boot sale looking for knocked off fags when I saw this picture of a woman with her jubblies out." The translation is, "On walking around a rather delectable market in search of counterfeit cigarettes, I chanced upon the outstanding painting of the female form." The dealer asks, "And how much did you pay for it?" The boy replies, 50p, man." The translation to this is, 50 new pence, my good man." The dealer exclaims, "Remarkable! This painting is called the Naked Maya, and it happens to be a very rare painting by the artist Francisco de Paula Jose de Goya." The boy replies, "No way, man. Well, I'm not going to sell it because it's got pure sentimental value." The translation is, "Very interesting. Of course, I shall be selling it to the first person who makes me an offer, and then I shall celebrate with authentic cigarettes and fortified wine brewed by monks in a monastery." Of course, there are some that don't get it full stop, like in this article, which never appeared in any newspaper whatsoever. "Dear editor, I have been travelling around car boot sales for the past 52 years. I initially started my fascination for car boot sales when I was 62 years old, and ever since my first booty," affectionate name given to a car boot sale given by Henry VIII when he attended a medieval booty, "I have one and only one question. Why, in all the years of visiting said aforementioned car boot sale, have I never seen a car boot for sale? You can find everything and anything for the home and garden, but I just cannot find a car boot for my 1943 Austin Meikle. Please, will someone bring a car boot to the next car boot sale?" So, I did manage to amass a decent collection of albums from various booties and jumble sales. But for the music I liked, it was limited. Sure, if you're into Slim Whitman or Fats Domino, then you will either have good fortune at a jumble sale or you have an eating disorder. I then, one day, whilst out shopping, thought I'd have a look in the many various charity shops dotted about all over the place. Why not? I mean, after all, if I managed to get albums from a charity shop, then they would be cheap, and I would be doing my bit for the charity. Winner, winner, I as a sinner. Well, dear friends, how my eyes were opened to the corporate world of charity. I quickly found the records and began browsing. I thought it was very thoughtful of the charity shop to put their telephone number on each album, but it wasn't the telephone number. No, it was the price. Were my eyes deceiving me? Was this some kind of practical April Fool taking place on a February morning? The records were more expensive in the charity shops than they were in the record shops. What was happening in this mad universe? Perhaps the albums were made of gold. Nope. Were they personally made by each artist? Nope. I asked the spotted youth behind the counter if the price on the ticket was a mistake, but I was told albums are now collector's items and worth so much more than they're worth. I then asked if the charity shop bought them in from specialist dealers at a high price, or perhaps from music moguls in the industry. The answer I got back was said in a much expected matter-of-fact way. No, they were handed in. I see. So, you got them for nothing? Free? Gratis? Nil? Hee-haw? Stupid me, but I was always led to believe that charity shops were primarily set up for two specific reasons. Reasons one, to help the charity shop collect some money for their named charity, and reason two, to allow those people in their community that are financially restricted due to ever-increasing bills to purchase goods at a much cheaper price than they would pay in the shops. Something somewhere has gone terribly wrong. Quite a few of these so-called charity shops are competing with each other, but it's not to bring the prices lower, it's the exact opposite. I saw a young boy, obviously down on his luck, who was looking for a suit because he had the opportunity of a job interview. The trouble was, he would have to get the job in order to be able to afford the suit in the first place. I also noticed through the years that some charity shops get rebranded and refitted from time to time, which must be very expensive indeed. And like any corporate business, they have managers, assistant managers, executives, directors, executive to the directors, managing directors, directors to the managers, and so on. Now, with these boutiques, you have to take out a loan just to step inside and have a look. Look, I'm not mean with money, or moaning for the sake of moaning, although that's what this section of the show is all about. But really, you are a charity shop! And if we could afford to buy our records, our bric-a-brac, our clothes, and our toilet paper first-hand, we would! Perhaps it's time to stop trying to make huge profits to satisfy head office and start thinking about the community you are there to help. Surely people who have very little deserve to find something in the charity shop that they perhaps always wanted but could never afford in a shop. Remember, you got it for nothing, so every penny is a profit. But with some people, every penny is a prisoner. Join me next time for another wrong put right in the Devil's Advocate, and you can let me know what's bugging you in the comments, and perhaps it will be part of the show. And remember to like, subscribe, comment, share this video, share your sweeties with me, and hit the bell. You can also get me new teeth. You can also check out my work at www.charliemarx.co.uk, and why not be part of the show by sending me your viewers letters. I really need the teeth. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Charlie Marx Show.